Alex had always loved the quiet charm of the countryside, so when he came across the property with the old lake, he knew it was the perfect escape. The land had been abandoned for years, the lake nothing more than a murky depression surrounded by wild grass, fallen trees, and forgotten memories. But Alex didn't see neglect. He saw potential. As he stepped onto the property for the first time, he could almost imagine the water sparkling under the sunlight, fish darting beneath the surface, and birds returning to nest along the edges. There was something magical about the space, something calling for care and restoration. The lake had been part of the property for generations, yet it had clearly been forgotten. The neighbors watched from a distance, their curiosity barely concealed. Some whispered about the young man who had taken on such a massive project, while others simply shrugged, assuming it was a fleeting interest. Alex didn't mind. He was used to working alone and finding joy in progress rather than approval. His first step was to survey the land carefully. The shoreline was choked with weeds, branches tangled across the bank, and the water was shallow and muddy. He took notes, marking areas that needed dredging, spots where wildlife might return, and sections of the bank that required reinforcement. The work ahead was immense, but the thought of seeing the lake alive again filled him with determination. The morning light fell over the property as Alex made a plan. He would clear the debris first, then slowly restore the water, and finally introduce plants and wildlife to bring life back to the area. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about nurturing an ecosystem, creating a space where nature could thrive once more. He spent hours walking around the lake, imagining the restoration step by step. Each fallen branch or overgrown bush became a challenge rather than a hindrance. The sunlight reflected off the stagnant water, and he could almost feel the pulse of the lake beneath the surface, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. Late in the afternoon, Alex received a letter. It was formal but polite, coming from the neighborhood association. They mentioned community interests in local properties and hinted at potential shared responsibilities for natural resources. Alex read it carefully but wasn't concerned. On paper, the land and lake were entirely his. Still, the letter left a faint unease, a reminder that even in quiet towns, rules and oversight could appear unexpectedly. As he looked out over the lake, Alex felt a surge of hope. This was the beginning of something meaningful. He would restore the lake not only for himself but for the wildlife, for the landscape, and for anyone who might one day enjoy its beauty. The project was going to take patience, hard work, and careful planning, but Alex welcomed the challenge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he stood on the bank, taking in the silence and the potential. The lake might have been forgotten for years, but Alex was ready to breathe life back into it. Whatever obstacles might appear, he was determined to see this vision through. Little did he know, the first signs of unexpected attention had already begun. Eyes were watching, documents were being checked, and what began as a personal project would soon become something far more complicated. But at this moment, Alex simply smiled, feeling the quiet promise of the lake whispering back to him, ready for a new chapter. The following morning, Alex arrived at the property before sunrise, carrying a notebook filled with sketches and plans. The lake, still sleepy under the soft light, seemed to sense the attention. Birds chirped in the distance, and the faint rustle of leaves promised the presence of life waiting to return. Today marked the first step in a journey that would transform the neglected lake into a place of beauty and vitality. Alex had spent weeks researching restoration techniques, reading about ecosystems, plant species, and water management. Now it was time to put knowledge into action. He started by clearing the shoreline, removing fallen branches, litter, and tangled weeds. Each piece of debris he lifted felt like peeling back years of neglect, uncovering the potential beneath. By midday, the bank looked visibly cleaner, and a sense of progress lifted his spirits. He had hired a small team of local landscapers and volunteers, drawn by the promise of contributing to a worthwhile project. Among them was Maria, an environmental consultant who specialized in water habitats, and Jackson, a handyman who had an uncanny knack for problem-solving. Together, they began planning how to dredge the lake, deepen the water, and shape the edges to support new plant growth. As the team worked, Alex noticed subtle signs of wildlife returning. A dragonfly skimmed the surface of the water, and small fish could be seen darting beneath shallow puddles. He felt a surge of excitement. The lake was responding to the care it had been missing for years. The presence of life fueled his determination to keep going, even as the physical labor took its toll. Each day brought new challenges. Some areas were too overgrown, requiring careful maneuvering to avoid damaging roots that might be beneficial to the soil. Others were muddy and unstable, slowing progress. Yet Alex approached each obstacle with patience. He had learned that restoration wasn't about rushing. It was about understanding the land, listening to it, and working alongside nature rather than forcing it. By the second week, the lake had begun to take shape. Pools of clearer water appeared, reflecting the sky and surrounding trees. The edges were reinforced with stones and native plants, and small channels allowed water to flow naturally, preventing stagnation. Alex walked the perimeter daily, inspecting progress, making adjustments, and dreaming about the future possibilities. As the project advanced, word began to spread. Neighbors would stop by, curious about the work and impressed by the transformation. Some offered to help with minor tasks, bringing tools or sharing tips about local plants. The lake, once forgotten, had begun to become a point of pride for the community, even if only a few dared to admit it openly. Amid the progress, a letter arrived from the neighborhood association. It was brief and formal, expressing interest in the property and the lake and suggesting a meeting to discuss community involvement. Alex read it carefully. Legally, the property and lake were his, yet the tone of the letter hinted at oversight rather than collaboration. He folded it neatly and set it aside. The lake was his responsibility, and for now, he would focus on nurturing it. As evening fell, the team packed up, leaving the lake calm and undisturbed. Alex lingered, walking along the newly cleared paths. He marveled at how different the space felt just weeks into restoration. The air seemed fresher, the sounds richer, and the reflection of the sunset on the water painted a picture that had long been forgotten. Alex understood that this was only the beginning. Restoring the lake was a long-term commitment, requiring dedication and care. He felt a quiet thrill at the idea of witnessing the full transformation, from a neglected murky pond into a thriving ecosystem filled with life and beauty. The effort was immense, but the reward promised to be even greater. As he left the property that evening, Alex glanced back at the lake, now shimmering under the fading light. Somewhere beyond the trees, shadows hinted at observers, but he chose not to dwell on it. The project was larger than any potential interference. For now, his focus remained on progress, on nurturing life, and on the dream that had inspired him to restore the old lake. And in that quiet moment, the lake seemed to whisper a promise. The work had begun, and the journey, however challenging, was destined to be extraordinary. By the beginning of the third week, the lake was transforming in ways Alex had only imagined. The water was clearer, reeds and native plants were taking root along the edges, and the first signs of wildlife, frogs, small fish, and birds were becoming a regular sight. Volunteers and neighbors who had once watched from a distance now offered help, bringing equipment or sharing advice about planting and maintenance. The sense of progress, however, was soon interrupted. One morning, a small group of well-dressed individuals appeared at the edge of the property. They introduced themselves as representatives of the neighborhood association. Their tone was polite, but the purpose of their visit quickly became clear. They claimed an interest in the lake, citing old community agreements that, according to them, could potentially involve shared responsibility or oversight. Alex listened calmly, trying to understand their perspective. He knew that on paper, the property and lake were entirely his. Still, the tone of the conversation carried a subtle insistence, a suggestion that his restoration work might not be entirely independent. One of the representatives handed him a folder with copies of outdated documents, maps, and letters from decades past. As Alex reviewed the materials, it became apparent that the records were ambiguous. Some notes referenced easements and community plans that had never been finalized. There was no clear transfer of ownership, yet the neighborhood association seemed to interpret these historical mentions as authority over the lake. Alex felt a growing tension in the air. This wasn't about collaboration, it was about asserting influence. He remained composed, explaining politely that he had purchased the property legally and had restored the lake entirely at his own expense. The representatives nodded, but their expressions were unreadable. They suggested that a legal review might be necessary and left without pressing further, though their presence lingered like a shadow over the peaceful landscape. Word of the visit spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors expressed quiet support, admiring Alex's dedication and the transformation of the lake. Others remained hesitant, perhaps uneasy about siding against the neighborhood association. Alex noticed the subtle shift in dynamics. While some welcomed the revitalization of the lake, others seemed wary of any conflict or attention. Despite the tension, Alex refused to let the encounter stall his work. He continued dredging sections of the lake, planting native grasses, and shaping the shoreline to support birds and other wildlife. Every morning brought the sight of rippling water reflecting the sunrise, a reward for the effort and a reminder of why he had embarked on this project in the first place. During breaks, Alex and his team strategized about how to handle potential challenges from the neighborhood association. Maria, the environmental consultant, reminded him to document everything meticulously: photos, receipts, and logs of work completed. Jackson suggested keeping a journal of any communications, ensuring there would be a clear record if disputes arose. Alex agreed. Preparation was as important as restoration. Meanwhile, the lake continued to flourish. Ducks began visiting regularly, and the water insects and fish created a delicate, balanced ecosystem. Even the volunteers felt the magic of the place, sharing stories of past adventures and imagining future gatherings by the water. The lake had become more than a restoration project. It was a living, breathing centerpiece of the property, and Alex's vision was taking tangible form. Yet the presence of the neighborhood association loomed in the back of his mind. Their visit had been brief, but the implication was clear. Interest in the lake had been sparked, and attention would not fade. Alex realized he needed to remain vigilant, balancing the joy of progress with the responsibility of protecting his work and rights. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Alex walked the shoreline, reflecting on the transformation. The lake had moved from a forgotten space to a thriving habitat, and while obstacles were emerging, he felt a quiet confidence. Restoration was not just about water and wildlife. It was about vision, patience, and the courage to stand by one's efforts. Little did he know, the neighborhood association's next move would escalate the situation, bringing the quiet project into the spotlight and challenging Alex in ways he had not yet imagined. For now, though, the lake shimmered peacefully, a testament to determination and hope, and a promise that the journey, though complicated, was only just beginning. By the fourth week, the lake had transformed dramatically. Clear water reflected the sky, reeds swayed gently in the breeze, and fish darted beneath the surface. Birds returned in droves, and the first dragonflies skimmed the sparkling surface. For Alex, the restoration was more than physical labor. It was a labor of love, patience, and vision. Yet the calm was beginning to fray. Another letter from the neighborhood association arrived, more formal than the first. This time, it hinted at potential legal review, citing historical agreements and community interests. Alex read the letter carefully, noting that while the words were polite, the intent was unmistakable. The neighborhood association wanted to assert some form of control over the lake. Determined not to be intimidated, Alex arranged a meeting with a lawyer experienced in property rights. The lawyer reviewed all documents, the deed, prior agreements, and HOA records. To Alex's relief, it became clear that he had full ownership of the land and lake. The neighborhood association had no legal claim. Still, the lawyer advised caution. Ambiguity in old records could lead to unnecessary conflict, and it was best to document everything meticulously to protect his rights. Alex took this advice seriously. He began keeping detailed logs of daily restoration work, noting which areas were cleared, planted, or dredged. Photos were taken systematically, showing the lake's progress from neglect to restoration. Every volunteer's contribution was noted, and receipts for equipment, plants, and supplies were carefully filed. This meticulous record-keeping became a daily routine, almost as important as the restoration work itself. Meanwhile, the neighborhood association made another visit, this time at a community meeting held in a nearby hall. Their representatives spoke politely but firmly about shared interests in natural spaces, subtly implying that the lake's restoration could affect community aesthetics and property plans. Alex attended with his lawyer, listening carefully and responding with calm, clear explanations. He emphasized that the lake was legally his property and that all restoration work was done responsibly, with attention to environmental impact. The tension in the room was palpable. Some neighbors whispered in support of Alex, quietly praising the beauty of the restored lake. Others remained hesitant, unsure how to navigate the complex dynamics between Alex and the neighborhood association. Despite the subtle pressure, Alex maintained his composure, realizing that patience and clarity were his strongest tools. Back at the property, restoration work continued. Alex and his team reinforced the banks with native plants, dredged remaining shallow areas, and carefully managed water flow to prevent stagnation. The lake began to feel alive in a new way. Frogs croaked along the edges, fish swam confidently in the clear water, and birds nested in the reeds. Volunteers marveled at the transformation, noting that the lake now seemed almost magical compared to its previous neglected state. Alex reflected on the delicate balance he was maintaining. He was nurturing a living ecosystem while simultaneously navigating the complexities of local oversight. It was a test of patience, resilience, and careful planning. Every phone, call, letter, and meeting was approached with thoughtfulness. The restoration had become a symbol, not just of environmental care, but of standing firm for what was rightfully his. By evening, the lake glimmered under the setting sun, a stark contrast to the tension that had begun to build beyond its banks. The transformation was undeniable. Alex felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, tempered by awareness that the neighborhood association might not concede easily. As he walked along the shoreline, Alex realized that the coming weeks would require both strategy and diplomacy. The restoration was far from over, and so was the challenge of protecting the lake from unnecessary disputes. With careful planning, clear communication, and the support of neighbors who admired his dedication, he knew he could navigate the tension without compromising the integrity of the project. The lake had become more than a body of water. It was a testament to vision, patience, and determination. And although challenges were mounting, Alex felt ready to face them, confident that the careful restoration of this forgotten space would endure, no matter what obstacles arose. Little did he know, the next stage of the struggle would bring public attention, unexpected allies, and tests that would push him and the neighborhood association into an entirely new dynamic. By the fifth week, the lake was unrecognizable from its previous state. Clear water rippled gently, native plants flourished along the banks, and wildlife returned in surprising numbers. Frogs croaked from the reeds, dragonflies darted across the surface, and fish glided confidently beneath the water. Volunteers and neighbors alike began to view the lake as a small miracle, a reclaimed piece of nature that had been forgotten for years. Alex had settled into a steady rhythm of work, balancing restoration tasks with managing communications from the neighborhood association. The letters had become more formal and frequent, expressing continued interest in the lake and hinting at community considerations. Alex remained calm, documenting every interaction meticulously, understanding that transparency was his strongest defense. Meanwhile, reactions from the community began to vary. Some neighbors approached Alex privately, praising his efforts and offering help. Mrs., who lived a few houses away, brought homemade snacks for the volunteers, expressing her admiration for the lake's transformation. A group of teenagers from the neighborhood volunteered to help clear small debris, fascinated by the wildlife returning to the area. These small gestures reminded Alex why the project mattered, not just for him, but for the larger community. However, not all reactions were welcoming. A few neighbors seemed hesitant, avoiding conversation or offering cautious remarks about rules and responsibilities. Alex sensed that their loyalty to the neighborhood association influenced their hesitancy. Yet he refused to let the mixed responses diminish his resolve. He focused on the tangible progress before him, the thriving ecosystem, the clean shoreline, and the growing sense of community around the lake. To celebrate the work so far, Alex decided to host a small, open lake day. Only a few neighbors were invited at first, to gauge reactions and maintain order. Families arrived with blankets, picnic baskets, and cameras, exploring the newly restored lake. Children chased dragonflies along the edge, while adults marveled at the clarity of the water and the variety of plants and animals that had returned. Alex stood quietly to the side, observing the joy and appreciation his efforts had created. The event had an unexpected effect. News of the restored lake spread quickly through word of mouth, and soon more neighbors expressed curiosity and support. Social media posts celebrating the lake garnered likes and comments, drawing attention from people outside the immediate neighborhood. The once forgotten body of water had become a point of pride, a symbol of what careful planning, dedication, and respect for nature could achieve. Of course, the neighborhood association took notice. A letter arrived a few days after the Open Lake Day, noting the event and suggesting that community access should be formalized. While the letter's tone remained polite, the implication was clear. The neighborhood association wanted influence over the lake's use. Alex reviewed the letter with his lawyer, reaffirming that all rights remained his, and he responded professionally, explaining that the lake was private property but welcoming respectful visits under his guidance. The reactions of the community members created a subtle shift in the dynamic. Those who had been hesitant began to see Alex's dedication firsthand. Supportive neighbors voiced their admiration more openly, offering testimonials about the lake's improvement and the value it brought to the area. Even some previously cautious residents began to acknowledge the positive impact of the project, though quietly preferring not to confront the neighborhood association directly. By evening, as Alex walked along the banks, he reflected on how the lake had become a living bridge between nature and the community. It was no longer a lonely project but a shared source of inspiration, albeit unofficially. Despite the continued presence of the neighborhood association, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence. His dedication, transparency, and willingness to engage neighbors had strengthened his position. The week ended with a peaceful sunset over the lake. Ripples of water reflected the fading light, the chorus of frogs and birds filled the air, and Alex felt a deep satisfaction. He knew challenges would continue, but the community's growing support was a powerful reminder that perseverance, careful planning, and respect for nature could overcome uncertainty. Yet as he left the property that evening, Alex sensed that the neighborhood association's next move would be more assertive. The project had drawn attention, and attention, as he knew, often brought confrontation. For now, though, the lake glimmered peacefully, a testament to restoration, vision, and the quiet power of persistence. The 7th week of restoration brought both triumph and tension. The lake now looked like a small paradise, with clear water reflecting the sky, reeds gently swaying along the edges, and fish darting through the deeper sections. Birds had claimed the newly planted trees and shrubs, filling the air with their songs. Alex felt a sense of pride every time he walked the shoreline. Yet beneath the beauty, the presence of the neighborhood association loomed like a cloud. It began with a surprise visit one morning. 2 representatives arrived unannounced, clipboard in hand, claiming they were conducting an inspection. Alex was caught off guard but remained calm. He greeted them politely and asked the purpose of their visit. They explained they were documenting community resources and suggested that the lake might affect neighborhood planning. Their tone was friendly but insistent. Alex allowed them to walk the property, carefully documenting the interaction with photos and notes. While they observed, he explained every step of the restoration, from dredging the lakebed to planting native species. He highlighted the return of wildlife and the environmental care that guided every decision. The representatives nodded politely, but maintained an air of authority, clearly intending to gather evidence for future discussion. As they left, Alex felt a mixture of frustration and resolve. Their presence was a reminder that progress often attracts scrutiny, and vigilance was essential. He met with Maria and Jackson later that day to review the inspection. They discussed strategies for maintaining transparency and protecting the property while continuing the restoration. Documentation, communication, and careful planning became even more critical. Word of the visit spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors expressed sympathy, applauding Alex's dedication and persistence. Others, influenced by the neighborhood association, remained cautious, unwilling to engage openly. Alex realized the project had become a symbol, a representation of what careful work and dedication could achieve despite oversight and potential conflict. The lake itself seemed undeterred by the human tension surrounding it. Frogs continued their chorus, dragonflies danced across the water, and fish explored the deeper channels Alex had carefully dug. The volunteers returned with renewed enthusiasm, inspired by the thriving ecosystem and the progress they could see with their own eyes. Even small victories, like the appearance of a heron fishing along the shore, felt like milestones in the journey. As the week progressed, the neighborhood association sent a formal notice requesting a meeting to discuss community access and potential oversight. Alex and his lawyer reviewed the notice carefully, recognizing the delicate balance required. They prepared clear documentation, evidence of restoration work, and a professional response emphasizing Alex's legal ownership while showing willingness to allow respectful, scheduled visits. The tension reached a peak during the scheduled meeting. Representatives spoke of historic agreements and community interests, attempting to assert influence over the lake's use. Alex remained composed, presenting photographs, logs, and legal documentation that clearly demonstrated his rights and careful management of the property. Maria provided expert insight into the environmental benefits of the restoration, reinforcing the positive impact of the project. The meeting ended without a definitive resolution. While the neighborhood association did not concede authority, they did not escalate further immediately. Alex felt a cautious sense of victory. He had maintained control over the property while demonstrating transparency, professionalism, and environmental stewardship. The community's growing support further strengthened his position. That evening, Alex walked along the lake, reflecting on the delicate balance he had maintained. The water shimmered under the setting sun, the chorus of wildlife filling the air, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The lake had become more than a restoration project. It was a symbol of resilience, dedication, and the rewards of careful effort. Yet Alex knew that the challenges were far from over. The neighborhood association's next moves could be more assertive, and public attention might complicate matters further. Still, he felt a quiet confidence. With careful planning, meticulous documentation, and the support of neighbors who appreciated his work, he could navigate whatever came next. The lake remained a peaceful sanctuary, yet beneath the calm surface, the tension simmered. The next phase of the journey promised challenges, unexpected allies, and critical decisions that would test Alex's resolve and the strength of the community around him. Weeks of hard work had transformed the lake into a thriving ecosystem. The water was clear and lively, reeds and native plants lined the banks, and the gentle movement of fish and frogs brought the property to life. Alex could hardly believe how far the project had come. Every detail, from the careful planting to the dredged channels, reflected months of dedication. Yet the neighborhood association remained a lingering presence, a reminder that even beauty could draw scrutiny. It began with a discovery in old property records. Alex's lawyer, while reviewing historical documents for the ongoing discussions with the neighborhood association, noticed a crucial detail. None of the old agreements the association cited actually granted them ownership or control over the lake. Some documents were incomplete, others outdated, but the legal precedent was clear. The lake belonged solely to Alex. This revelation marked a turning point. With the guidance of his lawyer, Alex prepared a comprehensive package of evidence. He documented the restoration work from start to finish. Photographs, receipts, volunteer logs, environmental assessments, and detailed descriptions of every improvement. This documentation would serve not only to protect his property rights, but also to highlight the careful, responsible work that had gone into restoring the lake. Alex decided to leverage the community's growing support. Neighbors who had quietly admired the restoration were invited to provide testimonials about the positive impact the lake had on the neighborhood. Families shared stories of children spotting frogs and birds for the first time. Neighbors spoke about the beauty and serenity it brought to the area, and volunteers described the teamwork and dedication involved in the project. These voices strengthened Alex's position and added credibility to his case. At the next formal meeting, Alex presented his findings and documentation. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. Representatives from the neighborhood association listened as he detailed the legal records, the restoration process, and the ecological improvements. Maria, the environmental consultant, explained the benefits of the habitat, the careful management of water flow, and the introduction of native plants that enhanced the local ecosystem. The neighborhood association, confronted with clear evidence and community support, had little room to argue. The legal loophole they had relied upon vanished under the scrutiny of documentation and testimony. Their tone shifted, from polite insistence to a quiet acknowledgement that Alex had done everything correctly, legally, and responsibly. Public attention also began to play a role. A local media outlet had heard of the restoration project and came to feature the lake in a community story. The article highlighted Alex's dedication, the volunteer effort, and the return of wildlife. Suddenly, what had been a quiet, private restoration became a symbol of environmental care and perseverance for the entire neighborhood. Faced with growing community and public support for Alex, the neighborhood association was forced to reconsider its position. While some members were reluctant, the board realized that pursuing the matter further could lead to public backlash. Alex had turned the situation in his favor not through confrontation, but through careful documentation, transparency, and the visible positive impact of his work. In a final gesture of diplomacy, Alex proposed a compromise: limited, guided access to the lake for the neighborhood, allowing residents to enjoy the restored natural space without interfering with his ownership. The association agreed, recognizing that collaboration rather than conflict was the best path forward. Walking along the lake that evening, Alex felt a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. The water reflected the golden hues of the setting sun, fish swam gracefully in the channels he had dredged, and birds nested in the reeds along the banks. He had not only restored the lake but had also protected it, ensuring that his vision could thrive without interference. The experience taught him valuable lessons about persistence, careful planning, and the importance of community. Challenges had arisen, but through patience, professionalism, and the support of neighbors who shared his respect for nature, Alex had prevailed. The lake, once forgotten, was now a thriving symbol of what dedication and foresight could achieve. As the last light faded over the water, Alex felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced uncertainty, scrutiny, and tension, yet the lake remained beautiful, vibrant, and fully under his care. The journey had tested him, but the triumph was as clear as the rippling water, shimmering with the promise of a lasting legacy. With the compromise in place, the lake had settled into a new rhythm. Limited, guided access allowed neighbors to enjoy the space responsibly, while Alex retained full ownership and control. The delicate balance between private property and community enjoyment was maintained with mutual respect, and for Alex, the victory was more than legal, it was personal. The restoration work had transformed not only the lake but the surrounding area. Native plants lined the banks, preventing erosion and providing shelter for wildlife. The water was clear, reflecting sunlight in sparkling patterns, and fish swam confidently beneath the surface. Frogs croaked harmoniously from the reeds, while dragonflies skimmed across the water, their wings catching the sunlight. Birds nested in the trees along the shoreline, creating a lively chorus that filled the morning air. Neighbors who had once been hesitant began to engage openly. Children played along the paths Alex had cleared, families picnicked under the shade of newly planted trees, and volunteers returned periodically to help maintain the thriving ecosystem. The lake had become a shared point of pride, though the credit remained with Alex's vision and persistence. The local media featured the restored lake as a model of community-oriented environmental restoration. Photographs captured the clarity of the water, the return of wildlife, and the vibrant plant life. Articles highlighted Alex's dedication, careful planning, and the collaborative spirit he had fostered among neighbors. This attention reinforced the legitimacy of his efforts, making it clear that the lake was not just a personal achievement, but a valuable addition to the neighborhood. Alex continued to care for the lake daily. Early mornings were spent inspecting the water, monitoring wildlife, and ensuring that plants were thriving. Volunteers occasionally joined him, bringing energy, ideas, and a shared sense of purpose. Alex welcomed their help, knowing that the lake's health depended on consistent care and attention. The neighborhood association, while still formally present, had largely withdrawn from active oversight. Their initial attempts to assert authority had been met with professionalism, evidence, and community support, demonstrating that careful documentation and transparency were far more effective than confrontation. Some members quietly acknowledged Alex's dedication, though grudgingly, realizing that his work had elevated the entire area. Over time, the lake became a symbol of what could be achieved through persistence, vision, and careful planning. It reminded neighbors and visitors alike that neglected spaces could be revived with effort and respect for nature. The experience also taught important lessons about standing firm, navigating challenges with patience, and fostering community in unexpected ways. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex walked along the shoreline alone. The water shimmered with golden light, the reeds rustled gently in the breeze, and a pair of ducks glided quietly across the surface. He paused, taking in the sight and reflecting on the journey. From a forgotten, overgrown depression of mud and weeds, the lake had become a thriving sanctuary, a living testament to resilience and vision. He remembered the early letters from the neighborhood association, the tense meetings, and the moments of uncertainty. Each obstacle had tested his resolve, yet every challenge had also reinforced his determination. By maintaining focus, documenting every step, and engaging the community thoughtfully, he had transformed potential conflict into an opportunity for collaboration and admiration. In the quiet of that evening, Alex realized that the lake's true legacy was not just the water, plants, and wildlife. It was the spirit it inspired. It was a space where neighbors could come together, where children could learn about nature, and where the beauty of dedication and care was tangible for anyone who visited. The restoration was complete, but the lake would continue to evolve with the seasons. Each ripple, bird call, and flowering plant was a reminder that life thrived when nurtured with patience and love. Alex smiled, knowing that the lake he had restored was now a permanent part of the landscape, a reflection of his hard work, vision, and unwavering commitment. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, the lake remained calm and serene. Alex walked away slowly, glancing back one last time. The water sparkled under the moonlight, a mirror of the sky, and he felt a profound satisfaction. The journey had been long, the challenges had been real, but the result was undeniable. A restored lake, a thriving ecosystem, and a lasting legacy of care, dedication, and harmony.